In the middle of galactic war, the alien princess made a deadly choice. Planets that had been centers of culture, commerce, and life were reduced to ash, their skies filled with fire and debris. Humanity had entered the galactic stage only decades ago, and yet their presence had already shaken the foundations of older empires. No one had anticipated their speed, their adaptability, or their refusal to back down in the face of impossible odds. Entire fleets of the Threxian conquered had been destroyed. Ships that had once been symbols of their power, now nothing more than wreckage drifting in cold, empty space. Princess Valera of the Threxian conquered stared at the holographic displays in her war room, the glow of the projections reflecting in her dark eyes. She had been trained for moments like this her entire life. Every lesson, every drill, every study of history had led to this. Yet no training could have prepared her for the choices she would soon face. The Threxian conquered had been powerful once, ruling several systems with authority and precision. Their fleets were fast, their weapons devastating, and their strategy had been perfected over centuries. But against humanity, centuries of dominance seemed meaningless. Humans had no respect for their traditions, their codes of honor, or their tactical doctrines. They fought with methods that the Threxians could not predict. Valera's advisors had warned her countless times. "Your Highness, humans are reckless, their ships are fragile, their soldiers die quickly. Retreat is the only option." But the princess could not ignore what she had seen. She had watched human commanders coordinate fleets without hesitation, repair ships in the middle of combat, and make split-second decisions that seemed illogical, yet always worked. There was a strange brilliance in their chaos, a dangerous intelligence that her people could not fully grasp, and she could not turn away from it. The war room was silent except for the quiet hum of the systems and the occasional beep of incoming transmissions. Valera's advisors hovered near the main display, their faces pale. They were loyal, but fear had begun to take hold of them. Valera herself felt a strange mix of fear and curiosity. Fear for her people, fear for herself, but curiosity about this species that had dared to challenge the galaxy. She leaned closer to the display, tracing the path of a human fleet as it moved with impossible precision through an asteroid field. The sensors indicated that the humans had lost half their ships in the engagement, yet they had achieved their objective. Valera could not help but admire them. It was not courage alone, it was intelligence, adaptability, and the ability to see the battlefield in ways the Threxians could not. Reports arrived constantly. Systems that had once been firmly under Threxian control were now slipping away. Communication satellites were being intercepted, supply lines destroyed. Worlds that were supposed to provide reinforcements were now isolated and vulnerable. Valera's council argued endlessly over what to do next. Some proposed hiding the remaining fleets in remote areas, hoping the humans would eventually retreat. Others demanded an all-out offensive, attacking human strongholds with everything they had left. Valera listened silently, her mind racing. Both options seemed wrong. Retreat would mean the death of her people's honor. Attack could mean total annihilation. And yet she could not simply wait. Time was running out. She turned away from the display and walked slowly toward the large viewport that looked out into space. Stars stretched endlessly in every direction, distant lights in a black ocean. She had flown past these stars countless times, had memorized every constellation, every jump point. Yet tonight, the vastness felt different, empty, dangerous. She could almost feel the human presence in the distance, small but growing, moving with quiet purpose across the void. A chill ran down her spine, but it was not fear alone. It was the realization that history was shifting, that the galaxy was no longer hers to command, and that every decision she made from this point forward could change everything. The human threat was not just in numbers or firepower. It was in unpredictability, in the way they refused to follow rules that others in the galaxy held sacred. Valera had witnessed human pilots risking their lives to save allies, engineers repairing ships that seemed beyond repair, soldiers leading charges that would have been suicide by any standard. And yet, somehow, they survived. Sometimes by luck, sometimes by skill, but always by thinking in ways that the Threxians could not understand. Her advisors called it foolishness. She called it brilliance. And as much as it frightened her, she knew she could not ignore it. Valera had been raised to be a ruler, to defend her people, to preserve the Threxian conquered at any cost. She had been trained to see weakness and strike before it could grow. But humans were not weak. That was the terrifying part. They were different. They were fast, intelligent, and unafraid to challenge older, supposedly wiser species. Valera realized that if she continued to listen only to her counsel, her people would die and the galaxy would forget them. She could not allow that. She could not allow her empire, her family, her people to fade into obscurity. And yet, making a decision now felt like walking across a knife's edge. The princess returned to her command chair, her mind racing. She needed information, understanding, and perhaps a new approach. She called for a secure communication channel to the nearest human fleet. Her advisors gasped in horror at her audacity. "Your Highness, they will not negotiate. They will destroy us," one of them said, voice trembling. Valera shook her head. "I do not intend to negotiate as a subordinate. I intend to understand, and perhaps to learn." The words surprised even her, carrying a calm certainty she did not fully feel. Yet she knew it was the only choice left. Waiting, hiding, or attacking blindly would lead only to ruin. The human fleet appeared on the view screen. Unlike Threxian ships, which were large, angular, and heavily armed, human vessels were sleek, practical, and unassuming. They moved in coordinated formations, yet each ship seemed to act with independent intelligence. Valera could not decipher all their strategies at once. She studied them for hours, observing patterns, predicting maneuvers, yet every prediction she made was challenged by a new, unexpected move. It was exhausting, thrilling, and terrifying all at once. Her mind raced through centuries of Threxian tactical knowledge, yet the humans constantly forced her to rethink every assumption she had ever held. At night, in the private chambers of her ship, Valera reflected on the humans she had seen personally. A young commander who had lost his entire squadron but still led the remaining ships with courage. An engineer who had repaired a warp drive mid-battle, saving hundreds of lives. A medic who risked his own safety repeatedly to save alien soldiers caught in the crossfire. These were not invincible, but they were relentless. She had seen many species in the galaxy, and yet humanity was something she had never expected, not just resourceful but capable of hope even in the darkest hours. She found herself wondering why they fought, what drove them, and whether her people could ever emulate even a fraction of that strength. The council grew restless. They argued, debated, and tried to persuade her to abandon her curiosity. Every suggestion was focused on survival, fear, or tradition. "Do not trust them," one said. "They will betray you," another warned. Valera listened but did not reply. Instead, she focused on the data, on patterns, on what she had seen firsthand. Something deep inside her told her that the galaxy was changing, and that humans were at the center of that change. To survive, she would need to take a risk, and it was a risk that terrified even her. For the first time, Valera considered a choice that no Threxian ruler had ever dared: to approach the humans, not as an enemy, not as a prisoner, but as a potential ally. It was dangerous beyond measure. If she misjudged, she would hand her people over to destruction. Yet if she was correct, it could alter the balance of the galaxy entirely. She imagined the faces of her people, those who had trained with her, fought with her, and depended on her. Could she gamble everything on this new species, this unpredictable force she barely understood? Could she trust them? The very idea made her stomach twist, but it also sparked a fire of determination she had not felt before. Days passed as Valera studied human tactics and culture. She observed how they communicated, how they organized, and how they inspired loyalty without demanding it. Their technology was crude in some ways, brilliant in others. Their ships were not as fast as Threxian designs, yet they adapted quickly, often turning disadvantage into advantage. Valera realized that humans had a kind of resilience that no one had seen in the galaxy before. They did not simply fight, they adapted, learned, and improved. They turned every setback into a stepping stone, and the more she watched, the more she knew that the time to act was now. Finally, after endless hours of observation, Valera made her decision. It was not an easy choice. It would defy tradition, anger her council, and risk everything she had known. But it was a choice she could not ignore. The Threxian conquered could not survive by following the old ways. The galaxy was changing, and survival meant embracing the unexpected. Valera would reach out to the humans, not as a prisoner or a supplicant, but as a leader willing to learn. It was a deadly choice, one that could destroy her people if it failed. Yet it was also a choice that held the only hope for survival, for understanding, and perhaps for victory. She issued the orders quietly, calmly, with the certainty of someone who had weighed every possibility. The flagship changed course, moving toward human-controlled space. Advisors protested, but Valera remained silent. She did not argue, she did not explain, she merely acted. The decision had been made. The humans would see the princess of the Threxian conquered approaching, alone in her flagship, not as a conqueror, but as a curious observer seeking understanding. And in that moment the war shifted, not through fleets or weapons, but through a single, dangerous choice that could alter the fate of the galaxy forever. As the stars streaked past the viewport, Valera felt a strange calm. Fear was still there, but it was tempered by a growing excitement, a sense that she was stepping into something greater than herself. Humanity was unpredictable, dangerous, and brilliant. And she would soon find out whether they were the key to saving her people or the instrument of their destruction. The journey toward the human fleet would take weeks, each day filled with tension, observation, and preparation. Valera spent the time studying every report, every transmission, every signal she could intercept. She trained her mind to think like a human, to anticipate their choices, and to understand the logic behind their apparent chaos. Every decision she made, every calculation, was a step deeper into uncertainty. But for the first time in her life, she did not feel paralyzed by the weight of responsibility. She felt alive, aware that her actions might shape the galaxy in ways no one had ever imagined. As Part 1 closes, the war rages on around her, countless lives at stake, and the stars themselves seem to wait in silence. Princess Valera has made her choice, a deadly gamble that could save or doom her people. And somewhere out there, humanity waits, unaware, yet central to the fate of the galaxy. Princess Valera's flagship glided silently through space, a lone vessel carrying the weight of her people's future. Each star she passed reminded her that the galaxy was vast and unforgiving, yet somewhere in this vastness were the humans she had chosen to approach. The journey was tense. Her advisors whispered constantly, warning her that humanity could be treacherous, that they would not hesitate to capture or kill her. Valera did not respond. Words could not change the reality that she had already committed to this course. Her mind focused on understanding, on observation, on preparation. She needed to learn what humans were capable of before presenting herself fully. Days into the voyage, Valera began to observe patterns in human transmissions she intercepted. Unlike the rigid, hierarchical communication of the Threxians, humans shared information rapidly, often openly, relying on shared intelligence rather than strict command. Valera was fascinated. Their system seemed chaotic, but within the chaos was a method she could not ignore. They adapted quickly. They learned from mistakes, and they inspired loyalty not through fear, but through example. The princess realized that humans' true strength lay not in their weapons, but in their minds. A single human fleet could survive far greater losses than a Threxian armada because they expected change, embraced it, and moved forward without hesitation. Her fascination grew as she continued toward human space. Valera spent hours analyzing battle footage, observing how human commanders made decisions under pressure. One encounter, in particular, caught her attention. A small squadron had been surrounded by a superior enemy force, yet the humans had coordinated an escape that left the enemy bewildered. The Threxians would have considered the situation hopeless, yet the humans exploited every weakness and turned desperation into triumph. Valera could not help but admire their courage and ingenuity. They were unpredictable, yes, but they were also clever and resilient. Perhaps this was why she had chosen this dangerous path. The humans represented not only a chance for survival, but a chance for her people to learn something new, something no Threxian training could provide. The princess's advisors grew more anxious as the days passed. They warned of ambushes, of betrayal, of the humans' ability to manipulate or deceive. Valera listened, but she had begun to see beyond fear. She had seen humans risk everything to save others, not for honor, not for glory, but because it was right. The Threxians had no word for it. They called it foolishness. Valera called it brilliance. She could not afford to ignore what she was learning. Perhaps the galaxy's future depended on embracing the qualities she had always considered weakness in others: compassion, flexibility, and the willingness to challenge norms. When Valera's flagship finally reached human-controlled space, she found herself both relieved and wary. The fleet she had been tracking was larger than she expected, yet organized and disciplined in ways that reminded her of the best Threxian commanders. Her sensors picked up no signs of immediate aggression. Instead, she detected careful observation, a quiet intelligence at work. It was as though the humans knew she was coming, and yet they made no hostile move. Valera realized then that they were different from every other species she had encountered. They did not rely solely on force. They relied on thought, on creativity, on the ability to turn disadvantages into advantages. A signal arrived, direct and secure, from a human admiral. "Princess Valera," the message said, "we are aware of your approach. We will not fire unless provoked. Prepare for rendezvous." Valera's heart raced. The calm, straightforward tone of the humans was both reassuring and unnerving. No threats, no arrogance, just an acknowledgement of her presence and an invitation to engage. She studied the coordinates they provided and realized that the meeting point was neutral space, far from both human and Threxian strongholds. The humans were giving her a chance to act without immediate danger, yet she knew the risk was immense. One misstep, one misunderstanding, and her entire people could pay the price. As her ship entered the designated space, Valera saw the human fleet waiting, sleek vessels arranged in a careful formation. The ships were smaller than hers, less heavily armed, yet they radiated confidence. Their organization suggested discipline, not recklessness. The princess realized that humans were masters of perception. They knew how to project strength even when it seemed lacking. She had heard warnings from her council about underestimating humanity. Now she understood why. These were not naive beings. They were strategic, adaptive, and surprisingly patient, and she had to approach them without showing fear, without appearing weak. Valera's communications officer guided her through the initial contact. She transmitted a calm, formal message, announcing her intention to meet with human leaders. Moments later, the fleet opened a corridor for her flagship to enter. Valera took a deep breath as she navigated through the passage, every second feeling like an eternity. The humans allowed her through without hostility, but she remained alert. This was not trust. This was observation, and she had to be prepared for anything. The meeting was held on a large human vessel equipped for diplomacy and strategy. Valera entered alone, her presence commanding yet cautious. The humans greeted her without ceremony, without intimidation. They did not ask her to kneel or submit. Instead, they observed her carefully, as if trying to understand what kind of mind had led her to this point. The princess realized that in this moment she was being judged not for her title, not for her lineage, but for her choices, her intelligence, and her willingness to act. It was a test of character, and she knew the stakes were higher than anything she had faced in her life. A human admiral stepped forward, his expression calm but attentive. "Princess Valera," he said, voice steady, "we have studied your fleet and your people's history. You are far from your home systems. Tell us why you have come." Valera regarded him for a long moment, considering her words carefully. She could not show desperation. She could not reveal fear. She had to convey both respect and purpose. "I have come," she said finally, "because my people face extinction. I seek understanding, not surrender. I seek knowledge, not subjugation. And I seek allies, not enemies." Her words were simple, direct, yet carried a weight that seemed to make even the humans pause. The admiral nodded slowly. "You have taken a great risk to come here," he said. "Few would dare to approach humans without expectation of conflict. Why should we trust you?" Valera's gaze did not waver. "Trust is earned through action, not words. I offer my fleet's knowledge, my people's survival, and my commitment to learning from you. If that is not enough, then my actions will speak louder than promises." There was silence as her words hung in the air, and for the first time, Valera felt the tension of true uncertainty. The humans were assessing her, weighing her intentions, calculating the risks. And in that moment, she realized how different they were from anyone she had ever known. They judged not by fear or tradition, but by potential and choice. The human commanders began to speak, asking questions about her fleet, about Threxian technology, about her understanding of the ongoing war. Valera answered carefully, revealing what she could without compromising her people. She noted the humans' focus on efficiency, adaptation, and the ability to use any information to their advantage. They were strategic in ways her advisors could not imagine. Yet beneath the formality, she sensed a subtle curiosity, a recognition of shared intelligence. It was as if they respected her not for her power, but for her decision to come forward, alone, risking everything for the sake of her people. The princess realized then that she had made the correct choice, even if it was the most dangerous one she had ever faced. Over the next several days, Valera worked closely with human strategists, sharing limited information and observing their methods. She was struck by their ability to adapt quickly, to turn incomplete data into actionable plans, and to inspire loyalty without relying on fear. They were fast learners, capable of adjusting tactics mid-battle, and willing to take calculated risks to protect their allies. Valera had never encountered a species that could match Threxian strategy in such an unpredictable yet effective manner. Her admiration grew alongside her understanding. The humans were not merely soldiers. They were thinkers, problem solvers, and innovators in a way that the galaxy had underestimated. As they worked, Valera began to recognize the potential of combining human ingenuity with Threxian resources. Her people had technology, experience, and strength, while humans had adaptability, creativity, and resilience. Together, they could form a force capable of challenging even the most powerful empires in the galaxy. But such a union carried enormous risk. If miscalculated, it could lead to total annihilation for both species. Valera understood that the coming weeks would demand not only strategy, but courage, foresight, and the willingness to take risks that her ancestors could never have imagined. One evening, While reviewing battle simulations with the human commanders, Valera felt a deep sense of both hope and responsibility. She realized that her decision to approach humanity was more than a gamble. It was a turning point in the war, and perhaps in galactic history. If she succeeded, her people might survive and learn from this new species. If she failed, she would witness the destruction of everything she loved. Yet for the first time in weeks, she felt a strange clarity. Fear was still present, but it was accompanied by purpose. She was no longer merely reacting to events. She was shaping them, guiding them, and preparing to challenge the impossible. As the first joint strategies were formulated, Valera's understanding of humans deepened. They were not flawless. They made mistakes, underestimated threats, and sometimes acted impulsively. Yet they learned from every misstep, growing stronger with each experience. Valera saw that their true strength lay not in perfection, but in resilience. No other species in the galaxy could recover from setbacks with such speed and effectiveness. And she knew that by working alongside them, her people could survive, adapt, and perhaps even thrive in ways the Threxians had never imagined. By the time the first coordinated missions were launched, Valera had fully committed to her deadly choice. She had trusted humans, revealing secrets and sharing strategies in ways that could have destroyed her people if mishandled. The missions were daring, testing human ingenuity against Threxian technology and enemy positions. And yet, every action confirmed what she had suspected. Humans were exceptional, unpredictable in the best way, and capable of turning even the most desperate circumstances into opportunity. The galaxy was changing, and Valera was at the center of that change. The galaxy was alive with tension, every star system a potential battlefield. Princess Valera watched from her command deck as the combined human-Threxian fleet moved with precision through the void, testing enemy defenses and probing for weaknesses. Every mission revealed something new about humanity's approach to war. They did not simply attack, they studied, adapted, and used every advantage the environment offered. Valera had never seen such ingenuity. Human engineers had already begun modifying Threxian ships mid-battle, enhancing shields, redirecting energy flows, and repurposing weapons in ways her advisors could barely comprehend. And yet, for all their cleverness, the humans worked with a calm patience that left Valera both impressed and uneasy. They were brilliant, yes, but always measured, never reckless without reason. Reports arrived from forward scouts. Entire enemy supply convoys had vanished, intercepted and redirected with minimal human losses. Worlds that had been considered strategic strongholds were now isolated, their defenses dismantled before a single full-scale attack was needed. Valera realized the humans did not rely solely on brute force. They relied on intelligence, observation, and adaptability. Their greatest weapon was not firepower, but thought. And as she observed these successes, she felt a growing sense of awe, tempered by the knowledge that even a single miscalculation could undo everything she had risked to reach this point. Valera spent hours in discussions with human strategists. They shared plans openly, debated tactics without ego, and constantly questioned their assumptions. The princess could see the difference between their methods and those of the Threxians. Humans valued creativity and speed over rigid doctrine. They anticipated, adapted, and improvised. Valera realized that she had underestimated them at first. Humanity's strength was not merely in courage or resilience, but in the way they could transform adversity into opportunity. The Threxian conquered had faced many enemies before, but none like this, and she understood that the war would not be won by tradition alone. The first major operation under the new alliance was set in motion. An enemy fleet, far larger than the combined forces of humans and Threxians, had moved to cut off key supply lines. Conventional Threxian strategy would have demanded a head-on confrontation, risking massive losses. But the humans proposed something different. They planned to divide the fleet, send smaller units on unexpected routes, and strike where the enemy least expected. Valera studied the maps, calculations, and simulations with a mixture of skepticism and fascination. The plan seemed reckless by Threxian standards, but every detail was designed to maximize efficiency and minimize exposure. She realized that the humans had a way of seeing possibilities that her people could not even imagine. As the fleet moved into position, Valera could feel the tension in her chest. The stars outside the viewport stretched endlessly, dark and silent, yet full of unseen threats. Her advisors whispered about the danger of relying on humans, the risk of disobedience, and the possibility that the enemy would exploit any weakness. Valera ignored them. She had made her choice. Humanity was no longer an unknown. They were her partners, her allies in a desperate gamble to preserve her people. And she could see already that this gamble was paying off. The battle began with a sudden strike. Enemy vessels expected a conventional attack, yet human ships emerged from previously impossible angles, using hidden routes through asteroid fields and gravitational anomalies. Valera's sensors confirmed what she had suspected. Humans had taken her people's advanced navigation algorithms and improved them in ways she could not have predicted. Ships that should have been out of range appeared suddenly, striking supply lines and command centers with precision. Enemy commanders scrambled, confused and unable to adapt. Valera's heart raced as she witnessed the results, human ingenuity in action, transforming her people's knowledge into something faster, smarter, and more deadly than the Threxians had ever achieved alone. During the battle, Valera realized another truth. Humans inspired the Threxians to act differently. Her advisors, initially fearful, began to adjust, adopting strategies they would have rejected before. Morale, long battered by losses, surged. Soldiers who had once doubted their chances now moved with confidence, inspired by the audacity and creativity of human tactics. Valera could feel the momentum shifting. The enemy, confident in their numerical advantage, was faltering. And in that moment, the princess understood the full magnitude of her decision. By trusting humanity, she had given her people more than allies. She had given them hope, ingenuity, and a new way to fight that could change the course of the war. Amid the chaos, Valera received updates from the forward squads. Entire enemy detachments had surrendered, realizing that the humans' unconventional maneuvers left them trapped and vulnerable. Not all battles were won through destruction. Some were won through strategy, deception, and clever planning. Valera watched the data streams, her eyes widening as one by one, enemy strongholds collapsed without significant human or Threxian losses. The galaxy seemed to be shifting beneath her, rearranging in ways she had never expected. And yet, for all the victories, Valera knew the war was far from over. The enemy would regroup, adapt, and strike back. But for the first time, she felt a glimmer of optimism. The humans did not celebrate. They analyzed their own performance, debated decisions, and identified mistakes, even in victory. Valera found herself drawn into these discussions, learning their methods and mindset. It was exhausting yet exhilarating. She realized that the humans' true strength lay not just in innovation, but in reflection. Every success became a lesson, every failure a tool for improvement. The Threxians had never done this. They had relied on experience and hierarchy, often blind to alternative possibilities. By working with humans, Valera saw her people beginning to change, not in body or weapon, but in thought, approach, and perception. As days turned into weeks, Valera and the human commanders planned increasingly ambitious operations. Entire enemy fleets were intercepted before they could reach their targets. Supply lines that had seemed invulnerable were disrupted with minimal risk. Systems once considered lost were reclaimed through strategy, improvisation, and courage. Valera's confidence grew alongside her admiration. She began to see humans not just as allies, but as an example of what her people could become if they were willing to learn and adapt. The galaxy itself seemed to bend in response to these new alliances and ideas, as though the rules of engagement were being rewritten in real time. The turning point came when intelligence revealed the enemy's secret weapon, a massive fleet designed to crush both Threxian and human forces at a decisive location. Traditional strategy would have called for caution, perhaps retreat. But the humans proposed a bold plan: divide their forces, use deception, and strike at multiple points simultaneously to confuse and disable the enemy before their weapon could be deployed. Valera studied the plan closely. It was dangerous, yet elegant. It relied on speed, adaptability, and trust between the species. For the first time, Valera realized that her choice had created something truly unique, an alliance capable of thinking beyond the limitations of a single species. The battle that followed was unlike anything the galaxy had seen. Human and Threxian ships moved in perfect coordination, exploiting weaknesses in the enemy fleet that had never been anticipated. Enemy commanders, overconfident in their superior numbers, found themselves outmaneuvered at every turn. Valera watched in awe as human pilots executed maneuvers that defied standard physics and logic, turning impossible situations into victories. The Threxian soldiers, inspired and confident, followed orders with precision and adaptability they had never shown before. The enemy's secret weapon was neutralized without catastrophic loss, a testament to the effectiveness of combined intelligence and strategy. By the end of the engagement, the enemy fleet was shattered, their systems in disarray. Valera realized that humanity had not merely assisted in battle, they had transformed it. The Threxians had contributed power and experience, yes, but humans had brought unpredictability, creativity, and relentless adaptability. Together, they had achieved something neither species could have done alone. Valera understood fully that this was more than a military success. It was proof that her risky choice to trust humans had been the right one. The galaxy itself was taking notice. Amid the victory, Valera reflected on the lessons she had learned. Humans were not flawless. They made mistakes, underestimated danger, and sometimes acted impulsively. But their ability to learn, adapt, and inspire those around them was unparalleled. The princess saw a future in which her people could survive, evolve, and thrive, not by clinging to old traditions, but by embracing new perspectives, new ideas, and new alliances. Humanity had shocked the galaxy not by sheer strength, but by their intelligence, courage, and relentless determination. As the fleet returned to regroup, Valera knew the war was far from over. Enemies would regroup, strategies would shift, and challenges would continue. Yet for the first time, she felt a sense of hope that had long been absent from the conquered. The humans had proven their value, not only as allies but as partners capable of transforming the outcome of a war that had seemed endless and hopeless. Valera's deadly choice had begun to bear fruit, changing the course of the conflict and proving that survival often required courage, creativity, and the willingness to trust the unexpected. In private moments, Valera thought of her people, of the generations who had relied on her leadership. She realized that she had done more than protect them. She had introduced them to a new way of thinking, a new way of surviving, and a new way of winning. The Threxian conquered, once rigid and proud, was learning lessons that might have seemed impossible only weeks ago. And in the eyes of the humans, she saw reflection of her own resolve. Courage, intelligence, and determination could overcome even the most formidable enemies. The princess understood that the coming weeks would demand even more daring and careful choices. The enemy would not remain passive, and every decision would carry immense consequences. Yet for the first time, Valera felt that she and her people were no longer at the mercy of the galaxy. They had found an unexpected strength in alliance, strategy, and trust. Humanity had proven that they could turn the impossible into reality, and Valera had learned that the deadliest choice could also be the one that saved everything. The galaxy held its breath. After weeks of relentless operations, the combined human-Threxian fleet had forced the enemy into retreat. Systems once under siege were beginning to breathe again, and the scattered remnants of opposing fleets were regrouping, unsure of how to respond to the unprecedented tactics they had faced. Princess Valera observed the calm from her command deck, her eyes scanning the stars that stretched endlessly before her. She could see the traces of recent battles, the burned-out wrecks of ships that had once represented the enemy's pride. Victory was within reach, but it was not yet complete. The final confrontation would demand the most careful planning and the greatest courage from every soldier, human and Threxian alike. Valera knew that her decision to trust humans had changed everything. Their unpredictability, creativity, and adaptability had reshaped the battlefield. Entire fleets that had once been considered invincible were now fractured and retreating. Yet the war had not ended. The enemy's remaining leaders were ruthless, and their desperation made them dangerous. The princess called a council of both human and Threxian commanders to plan the next steps. The meeting was tense but orderly. Humans proposed bold maneuvers that Valera had learned to trust, while Threxians offered logistical support and strategic knowledge of enemy habits. Together, the combination of experience and innovation created a plan that was both daring and precise. Intelligence indicated that the enemy's Central Command fleet, which had avoided engagement until now, was preparing to strike a final blow at the heart of a neutral sector. This sector was crucial. If it fell, the humans and Threxians' supply lines would be cut, and the war could shift again in favor of the enemy. Valera understood that this was the moment for the ultimate gamble. She had placed everything on the humans' ingenuity before, and now, once again, she would have to rely on their adaptability. The princess reviewed the battle maps with human strategists, watching as they plotted movements, anticipated enemy reactions, and prepared contingencies that were layered like a chessboard. Her respect for these people had grown immeasurably. They were not just soldiers, they were visionaries. The fleet moved into position quietly, avoiding detection as much as possible. Human and Threxian pilots were tense but focused. Valera could sense the anticipation, the nervous energy that comes before a decisive battle. Communications hummed with coordination, plans being adjusted as scouts reported new enemy positions. Valera felt a strange mixture of fear and excitement. She had taken a deadly risk in trusting humanity, but now she could see the reward in their actions, in their courage, and in the loyalty they inspired across both fleets. When the enemy fleet finally appeared, it was larger and more heavily armed than anything Valera had seen in recent weeks. Conventional wisdom would have demanded retreat, but the humans had devised a plan that relied not on brute force, but on ingenuity. They split the fleet into multiple groups, each executing maneuvers that appeared chaotic to an observer, but were coordinated through constant communication and anticipation of enemy reactions. Valera watched in awe as ships moved through asteroid belts, used gravity wells to alter trajectories, and emerged in positions the enemy had never anticipated. The Threxian fleet, once rigid in its tactics, adapted quickly, inspired by the humans' audacity and flexibility. The first engagement was fierce. Enemy weapons fired with deadly precision, yet human shields adapted in real time, energy flows redirected to protect vulnerable areas, and ships emerged from unexpected positions to strike at enemy weak points. Valera's heart raced as she observed the chaos that had been orchestrated into a symphony of strategy. Each move was deliberate, calculated, and executed with a calm confidence that belied the danger. Enemy commanders struggled to respond, their reliance on predictable tactics leaving them vulnerable. The princess realized that this battle was not being won by numbers or firepower alone, but by the intelligence, creativity, and relentless determination of humanity. As the fight continued, Valera coordinated her own forces, directing Threxian fleets in ways that complemented human maneuvers. They worked together seamlessly, covering each other's weaknesses and exploiting the enemy's mistakes. It was as though a new kind of warfare had been created, a fusion of Threxian experience and human innovation. Valera could feel the momentum shift, the enemy faltering as their plans collapsed under the weight of combined strategy. Entire squadrons surrendered when they realized escape was impossible, not out of fear alone, but out of respect for the precision and adaptability they faced. In the midst of the battle, Valera reflected on the choices that had brought her here. Trusting the humans had been a deadly gamble, a risk that could have ended in annihilation for her people. But it had worked. They had shown brilliance, resilience, and courage that no Threxian alone could have matched. And in that brilliance, Valera saw the possibility of a new future for her people, one not limited by old hierarchies and traditions, but capable of learning, adapting, and thriving in a galaxy that had once seemed hostile and unchangeable. Hours passed, the battle raging across the stars. Valera remained at her command station, issuing directives, monitoring progress, and adjusting strategies with the humans. She witnessed acts of courage and ingenuity that left her in awe. Pilots risking everything to save Allied ships, engineers repairing critical systems mid-combat, strategists anticipating enemy reactions before they occurred. The humans did not fight recklessly. They fought intelligently, using every advantage, turning disadvantages into opportunities. Valera realized that she had underestimated them in the past. They were not merely a rising species. They were a force capable of shaping the galaxy itself. By the time the final phase of the engagement arrived, the enemy fleet was in disarray. Their central command vessel, the largest and most heavily armed ship, attempted to break through human Threxian lines to strike a critical point. Valera recognized this as the moment that would decide the war. The human strategists proposed a daring maneuver: surround the vessel from multiple angles, disable its weapons, and force surrender without destroying it. The plan was risky. Failure could result in catastrophic loss, yet Valera trusted the humans implicitly now. She gave the order. The operation unfolded with precision. Human and Threxian ships moved in perfect coordination, exploiting every weakness in the enemy vessel. Shields were bypassed, weapons neutralized, and communication systems jammed. Enemy commanders struggled to react, trapped by the ingenuity and discipline of their opponents. Valera felt her pulse quicken as the final moments approached. Every calculation, every decision, every risk she had taken led to this. And then, the enemy vessel surrendered. The victory was absolute. The enemy fleet was broken, scattered, and retreating to distant systems. Systems once under threat were now secure. Supply lines were restored. The war, which had seemed endless and devastating, was finally drawing to a close. Valera allowed herself a moment of relief, but she knew that the cost had been high and the responsibility remained. Her people had survived, but survival alone was not enough. They needed to learn from this experience, to adapt, and to ensure that such a threat could never endanger them again. In the aftermath of the final engagement, Valera met with human commanders to discuss the next steps. They spoke not of glory or reward, but of lessons learned, improvements to strategy, and the future of the galaxy. Valera realized that the humans' true victory was not in the destruction of enemies, but in the knowledge they had created, the alliances they had forged, and the example they had set. Her people had not only survived, they had grown stronger, more adaptable, and more capable of facing future challenges. Returning to the Threxian home systems, Valera was greeted with cautious relief. Her people had survived the war largely intact, thanks to the partnership with humans. They had seen firsthand the value of adaptability, intelligence, and courage beyond rigid tradition. Valera addressed the council and the fleet, her voice carrying across the command halls. She spoke of the humans, of the lessons learned, and of the need to embrace change. Her words were met with mixed reactions, some skeptical, others inspired, but no one could deny the results of the war. Valera reflected on the personal journey that had led her to this moment. She had made a deadly choice in trusting humanity, a choice that had risked everything. Yet it had succeeded beyond her expectations. The humans had proven that strength was not only in numbers or firepower, but in intelligence, creativity, and the willingness to challenge convention. And through that partnership, the Threxian conquered had survived, learned, and evolved. Valera knew that her people would never be the same, nor would the galaxy. Across the stars, humanity had earned recognition, not as conquerors but as innovators, allies, and survivors. Valera watched as humans returned to their home systems, preparing for the next challenges of a galaxy forever changed by their presence. She felt a deep respect for them, for their courage, their ingenuity, and their relentless determination. And she knew that the future of her people would be inseparable from the lessons learned in this war, a war transformed by a deadly choice, by trust, and by the brilliance of an unexpected ally. In the quiet moments that followed the celebrations, Valera stood on the deck of her flagship, gazing at the stars. She felt the weight of responsibility and the thrill of possibility. The war had ended, yet the galaxy would continue to challenge her people. But for the first time, she felt confident that the Threxian conquered could face the future, not alone, but with allies who had proven themselves in the crucible of conflict. Humanity had shocked the galaxy and in doing so, had given Valera the one thing she had hoped to secure: survival, hope, and the chance to build a new legacy. Princess Valera understood the magnitude of her decision. By risking everything, she had created an alliance capable of changing the course of history. The galaxy would remember this moment, this partnership, and the courage it had taken to trust the unexpected. And as the stars shimmered before her, she knew that her deadly choice had not only saved her people, but had also shown the galaxy what humanity and cooperation could truly achieve. In the middle of galactic war, the alien princess made a deadly choice.